everyone. Yeah, that's my dog. What's up? Saying what's up. You can see me, so I was like, why not just put a cute picture up? I am Jasmine. I am from Fairfax, Virginia, but right now I am in Charlottesville, Virginia, but getting ready to move back to Fairfax where my family is. And if you all want to, or I guess Jocelyn, sorry to, and Anne now, sorry to put you on the spot, but if you want to type in the chat where you're coming from, are you also in Virginia? Are you somewhere on the East Coast? If you don't mind just typing in your chat, where are you right now? Are you coming from, or are you sitting in a town that is maybe somewhere where you're from, or maybe you are visiting? But feel free to tell me where you're coming from and maybe what position you're in, classroom teacher, coach, administrator, just if you feel comfortable, so I can make this a little bit more unique for you. But like I said, I'm Jasmine Azimi. I am from Virginia. My dad is from Afghanistan. My mom is from El Salvador. So my first generation college graduate along with my sister. And some of my interests are like dogs. I love dogs. I love like time outside. I've been finding myself investigating and like engaging in the momentum of this summer with BLM and getting deeper into some ways that I can approach teaching this year. So I'm really excited about that. Baltimore, awesome, 3rd grade, yes, 3rd grade teacher, Andrea or Andrea, oh my gosh, that's awesome. So anyway, so yeah, so, but above all, I am a teacher. I have taught for 8 years. Just in Virginia. I've taught for 4 years in Fairfax, Virginia before moving down here to Charlottesville, completing my 4th year here. So I'm walking into my 9th year, woohoo! Yes, so exciting. Anyway, down here in Charlottesville, I've acted as a diversity resource teacher. I've been on a equity audit cohort, which basically just means like administrators invited me along with some other teachers to data meetings, team leader meetings, just to kind of make suggestions around equity. This past year, I was certified in culturally responsive teaching, and hopefully by the end of this, you will know what that means. But if not, I have my contact. I'll give you my contact and we'll just kind of chat together. Oh, thanks so much. You guys are the best. But above all, yeah, I am a teacher. I consider myself a servant leader of education. My purpose is to serve. That's my why. I come to school with that as my why. This past summer, along with probably like you, engaging in all the Zooms, getting all the books and reading whenever I can. I'm also partnering with a professor at UVA, since we're in Charlottesville, or I'm in Charlottesville currently. I'm partnering with a professor from UVA with other teachers, and we're basically creating this like parallel curriculum for the new teachers from UVA to participate in. So we're just kind of like creating a draft of what anti-racism means in the classroom as far as at the collegiate level. So those are some things I'm doing. Welcome, it looks like some people have joined us. So excited that you're here. This is my very first time I'm like presenting, so if I act kind of silly, please forgive me. And feel free to unmute yourself or like say something funny, or if you're like, wait, that was interesting, feel free to do that. I'm so into feedback and interaction. But yeah, can we go to the next slide? Thank you so much. Simone is controlling all the heavy duty stuff. All right, so this is what we're going to get into. So what is CRT, or what is culturally responsive teaching? You might hear me or other people in the work say culturally relevant pedagogy, but really, like when I refer to it as culturally relevant or culturally responsive, I kind of just mean like this work. So I might mix and match those terms. So what in the world is it? How do I collect impact, or how do I collect data to show impact of the strategies or skills that I'm trying to incorporate? I'm going to try and give you some ready to go things to take to this school year, whether it's virtual or a face-to-face hybrid, or if you need to do like a pivot in the middle of the year. So I'm going to give you some ideas of how to implement some CRT strategies. And then immediate next steps. So I have a link here, or at the end, where if you want to, there are like these free webinars if you want to go to them and continue learning. And then like a website if you just want to look at different podcasts, books, that kind of thing. So that's what we'll be doing. Yay. Simone, could you? Awesome. All right. So there are these two amazing women. These names will be in your forever referring to, or you'll forever be referring to these women when you're into this work. And watch out, they are going to be your academic mambas. One of these amazing women is Gloria Ladson-Billings. And Gloria Ladson-Billings is truly, she commits to saying culturally relevant pedagogy, so you'll hear her say that. And then Zaretta Hammond, she's the one who wrote this book, the CRT and the Brain book, which has become somewhat of it's always on my bed book kind of. But so basically CRT, or culturally responsive teaching, is not a bag of tricks. Even though in this culturally responsive in the Brain book, there are some strategies at the end of the book, they're at the end for a reason. There's a lot of investigation to be done before applying the strategies. But I'll tell you now, if you want to include some culturally responsiveness in your lessons, there are 3 things that you can include in just about any lesson or part of a lesson that Zaretta Hammond has given us, so we know it's coming from someone good. So one strategy that you can add to any lesson or any part of a lesson is gamifying something. So touching or going into students' competitive side. So gamifying something, storifying it. So if you can draw from either your ability or maybe a student's ability to storytell. And then the third one is to make it social. So if you're okay, I just want to get, or if one of the teachers around your or not around your building, but because we're pretty much virtual, or most of us, I guess. But if some people are all right, just give me some ideas, just tell them, storify it, gamify it, and make it social. Boom, done. But if you're really invested in the work and you want to apply these things with a little bit more heart and with a little bit more closer to what is expected, or closer to what could make an impact, these women, Gloria and Zaretta, are going to tell you that it is not a bag of tricks. It is a pedagogical approach. It's a reframing of how you see school, similar to some of the sessions that I know I've seen today and what they're saying. So in addition to the social justice and race identity work, culturally responsive teaching is really trying to understand how is a child's brain wired, and what can teachers do to synchronize ourselves or synchronize our theories so that our students can feel more confident displaying their cultural expressions. So Gloria Ladson-Billings will tell you, culturally relevant pedagogy is students' ability to recognize social inequities, student ability to understand social inequities, and this one's a big one, students' ability to critique the current and social inequalities. So those abilities to recognize, understand, and to critique, that's where it becomes from good teaching to culturally responsive teaching. So the biggest difference between culturally responsive teaching and good teaching is how you are incorporating the social inequities that are existing anyway, into your classroom. and then documenting that impact. Going through my culturally responsive teaching certification process, it was a lot of data, and I almost felt like I wasn't a teacher anymore. So being able to document your impact through data, which I'll show you how to do that in a moment. So sometimes, while sometimes we might have that intention, we intentionally include ways to gamify or to change our lessons or to incorporate specific books into our lessons. Sometimes we have that intention for students to recognize, understand, and critique, but sometimes we just don't make that impact. We don't have the impact that we're expecting. So, so how can we make more of an impact? And good teaching can really just be super vulnerable to what the teacher is bringing to the teacher's interpretation of like, of the exceptionalist or the exceptional meta narrative that schools should continue to like fall into, which also though might be strung from a structural racist instrument. But what Gloria Ladson-Billings says, that recognizing, understanding, and critiquing social inequities, current and social inequities, that's where culturally responsive teaching makes more of an impact. So for example, I've taught like almost every grade. Am I talking too fast? I've taught almost every grade. Awesome. I've taught almost every grade, including kindergarten. So shout out to those kindergarten teachers. But I mostly spent my time in third grade, or teaching third grade. I've taught kindergarten, third grade, fourth grade, and fifth grade. So what does that look like? How do you critique social inequities, or how do you recognize, and how do you do this, Gloria? So one example would be if and when you give the students tools and then time to practice how to critique something. For example, a high stakes test. In Virginia, we take what's called the SOL test. So if a child has practice critiquing a high stakes test, or even having time to practice critiquing a behavior management system, then they then they might see it as learning like a cheat code. And even though they know this cheat code, they might not necessarily, then they can apply it in a way that will help them. Because when students understand that there are flaws within something that has existed for years, including high stakes tests and behavior systems, when students recognize that there are flaws and where those flaws are, then students might have more agency to work around those flaws and then pass the test. Something that I think of a lot is if I am a culturally responsive teacher and I get to be around these students for a year, but they go to another teacher next year and that teacher is not culturally responsive, I just think about that situation. What transferable skills are you committing to? And you and I, like, we are at the right place, the best place really, to build a culture of students that know how to enact these strategies and combat inequities. So the next slide has a big quote. Oh my gosh, you're gonna be like, ugh, really? I have to read. So this is a really great quote. It's from a book called Teaching to Transgress, Education as a Practice of Freedom. I just love that name too. Education as the Practice of Freedom by Bell Hooks. So if you want to read it on your own, feel free, but I can read it out loud. Just get it big. Here we go. School changed utterly with racial integration. Gone was the messianic zeal to transform our minds and beings that had characterized teachers and their pedagogical practices in our all-Black schools. Knowledge was suddenly about information only. It was no longer connected to anti-racist struggle. Bused to white schools, we soon learned that obedience and not the zealous will to learn was what was expected. And so in this book, as well as some parts of the Ibram X. Kendi book, um, um, schools are basically described as, or some schools are still described as white spaces despite the integration. So because we are supporting social, political, and religious causes. So when that racial integration occurred, something was lost with these teachers and with the pedagogy. So just like accounting for that is really important. And what was lost may be leading to the inequitable outcomes in our classrooms, including stereotype, threat, teacher biases, achievement, opportunity gaps. So there's something to be said about integration. Okay, awesome. Simone, do you mind just taking us to the next slide? Sweet, okay. So I told you all that I was certified in culturally responsive teaching, which basically means there were 3 buckets, and these are the 3 buckets to show both professional and student impact or growth. So one of the buckets is looking inward. What's my lens? What's the bias that I am already bringing or already living in? And the second one is, how am I planning my instruction? And how am I documenting student growth or student impact? And the third one is building positive relationships, recognizing parents as experts of their child, and recognizing families as the experts. Can we go to the next slide? So this is this is a place where you can, or these are options for you to take back with you to look at. These are ways that you can actually document progress in culturally responsive teaching, both at elementary and the school level. I do have an example of one way that you can collect relational data through a climate survey. And Simone, do you mind sending us the next page? Something as simple as polling your children or polling your students, you know, how do you like to learn best? Where do you like to learn best? So polls are really simple. They can be on Google, or they can just be something else that maybe you have access to. Awesome. All right, Simone, do you mind going to the next? Awesome. All right, so this is the first bucket that I had to, or that we can all like engage in to show growth within our cultural responsiveness. And this really does take into account, like, all right, it gives us a reminder that Kendrick was right. We sometimes just need to sit down and be humble. And just like we are sort of positioned in this picture of a student in the front and we're kind of looking in the back, just the way that this picture positions us, it's kind of like that. You just kind of have to step back just a little bit to know more. Simone, do you want to take us to the culture tree? Thank you. Okay, this culture tree is great. It's honestly the best way that I could define what culture is, extending beyond the linguistic and the ethnic diversity that we already account for when speaking on culture. As you can see, culture is a lot of what you're just downloading as an infant. And if it's all right with you, I just want to give you some time and just pause here for a minute so you can see what culture is. Notice that there are some layers, the surface, shallow, and deep layer. And there might be something that surprises you about where something is, or maybe something that surprises you about what culture is. Like something that surprised me was like tempo of time. I didn't really think of that as being something that described your culture, but then I started talking to another teacher about that, and we were kind of talking about like being in line for something and and yeah, I don't know, it was just a good conversation. Anyway. Oh, hey, my sister's here. Hey. So yeah, so culture runs deep, right? It's definitely something that is more than, maybe more than what you may have tuned into before. And so one way that I engaged my students, I was teaching 4th grade at the time, with this culture tree. I asked them, and you can do this with your students, or I know that some teachers, some coaches, some principals actually do this with their staff. So you can have people just write down some identity qualifiers on an index card or a piece of paper or a sticky note. Like, what's your gender? What is your race? What's your language? What's your neighborhood? Your religion? Are you able-bodied? And then slowly, and maybe with different prompts, start crossing out some of those qualifiers that might not shape the way that you make decisions, or that might not shape the patterns that you're making in your classroom. And so once you start to kind of knock off some qualifiers while they're still important to you, you start to see that there is maybe 1 or 2 that might be deep culture to you, but knowing that someone next to you has something else on their card was really helpful for my students to not only engage in their identity, or to engage in what their lenses are, but to recognize that everyone is coming with something else. So so this tree also reminds us to not call out a student based off of something that you're not sure where it's coming from. Otherwise, you're just inclined to project your biases, like talking back, right? So maybe talking back is a way to connect with you. Maybe it's a way to show that you are competent through the debate. Maybe talking back is an example of being precocious or inquisitive. So just kind of being able to link some cultural displays or cultural expressions to this tree might help you. And it might help you realize that because things go deep, there are things that are harder to negotiate. For people to think, to negotiate out of, or think in a certain way. So it just shows us that that we're all rooted. All right, Simone, do you mind? Awesome, thank you. All right, so I know what you're thinking now. You're like, oh my gosh, I have so many cultures in my classroom. You just made me do more work, or I have more work and I need to figure all of this out. There are these cultural archetypes, and that basically kind of like bring people together. The big ones are collectivists and individualists, and the other one is oral and written. So so basically there's 100 ways to figure out how where your students might fall into these spectrums of collectivists and individualists, and then secondly, oral and written. But I'll just tell you real quick. Actually, Simone, do you mind going to the next slide? This might be easier to explain the collectivist and the individualist. So sorry, this is like a really ugly slide, I realize, but I wasn't sure how to show it otherwise. Basically, this is one page of Zaretta Hammond's book, and different countries were scored on a 1 to 100 scale, and then 1 are really collectivist cultures, and then 100 are really individualist cultures. So if you squint your eyes and if you can see it, the United States is at the top with a 91 score, which means we are an individualist culture. So like emphasis on individual study and reading, emphasis on self-reliance. But then when you go all the way down, like countries like Guatemala and Ecuador, these countries are more collectivist, that focus on interdependence, that learning happens through group dialogue and collaboration. Simone, do you mind going to the next slide, please? So this was basically me. The blue is my mom's country. The purple says Pakistan. My dad's from Afghanistan, but Pakistan was the closest that I could pick. And then the United States is me and my sister. And so you can see like the green, the 91, the really tall one, in the individualism category, just shows how different I came from, or a different experience or culture that I'm bringing to the table compared to some of my friends in school or otherwise. I definitely want to, Simone, do you mind just jumping to page 14 or slide 14? It's the really like suggestions for instruction. Just before we head out here in a bit, I definitely wanted to share this with you because these are like kind of ready to go things that you can do in your classroom, virtually or not. The first one, and I did put this, I put a link here, and it's also in the notes. I don't know, I can put it in the chat actually. But this link, it's a really good link, or it's a really great one. It's just a podcast for through NPR with this author slash Professor Ebony Elizabeth Thomas, and she just tells us how to preview books before reading. You know, where are the characters, or if there are characters of color, how are they being portrayed? Like literally, where are they on the pages? And if they are smiling or happy, what are they doing as they're smiling? Is it a book where there is an enslaved person who is serving and smiling? Or is there a book or an image of an enslaved person smiling, and that smiling shows resistance and joy as resistance with their family? So it's just like tuning into some more specific ways that illustrators have made their decisions. Number 2 says teach about the brain. Give your kids some opportunities to know that there are different parts of your brain, that your brain can do different things. One part of your brain learns, one part of your brain connects with people, one part of your brain kind of impacts your ability to feel safe. So teach them about the brain. It's a really great idea. Including this mirror and window strategy and Venn diagram. So every time you read a book or a poem or something, you can ask students to decide, is this a story or an image that is providing a window for you? Are you able to, is this content new to you? Or is it like a mirror? What parts of this story or content is like your story? 4th says use books that describe a summer of a Black or Latinx child. And then 5, this is more, I picture this more if you had like a face-to-face setting this year, but I think you can make it work depending on what resources you use. But this is a way, number 5 is just a way that you can introduce books. Instead of like by sections, you can kind of describe them as playlists, giving students like a preview of one of the playlists that's titled, then the playlist can be something like You Gotta Be, or Brave books, or student-made books. So just kind of doing something like that. And then, are we over time? Sorry. Oops, sorry, I think you're muted. Sorry, Simone, I think you're muted.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I don't know if this is an okay slide where you feel comfortable ending it, because we also will be sharing this as well. That's up to you.
Yeah, can I just share 2 more if that's okay?
Sure, the next session does start in a couple minutes.
Okay. Well, could you just show this last one then, the next one? Oh, sorry, the next one after that. So on these slides, UVA has put together some videos along with some ideas of how you can schedule your day. And so this was just one way. It's called the Freedom School. I think there might be one in California, but there's definitely one here. It's just interesting, like how are you going to make an impact with families and students online? And a lot of this is just like encouraging you to build in time for one-on-one. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Jasmine, and I'm so sorry about the time.
No problem. Yeah, this is
everybody great. Who is able to join us, and like I mentioned earlier, this will be this has been recorded. We'll be sharing it, and we'll also be sharing the slides as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Simone.
Thank you.
Everyone else.